Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Tea on Tap. As we do every week, while we wait for people to tune in, we're going to listen to our theme song, Tea for Two. And we're going to look at the immensely talented Miles Davis the Pug. One more trick, and then I'm going to welcome our guest, Mr. Josh Hilberman. You better catch this one, Miles. One more. Here, I'm going to welcome our guest, Josh. All right, you get one more try, Miles. Here we go.
Good? Is it classy?
That is as classy as it gets.
Hi, Mark. Nice to see ya.
Nice to see you.
I didn't want to be recognized, you know.
You are incognito.
Incognito.
It's you. I didn't know who that was.
Good one, huh? Thanks.
How are you doing, Josh? What a pleasure to see you.
Doing good, man. It's my first Instagram experience, as you know, other than the profanity-ridden thing of last night. So, really looking forward to get a second chance.
I can't wait. Show me your mug. What kind of a mug do you have today?
That's
Tell everybody about
really
it.
Cool. That is a Brenda Buffalino original. She made me and Stephanie a pair of matching mugs, and I got one out. When you said mug, you know, I was like, oh, I know one. So Buffalino is with us in the house. There you go.
And do you mind sharing what is in that mug?
I'm taking the Michael Jordan approach. He seems to have like $1,800 a bottle tequila, so I've got mine loaded up here, you know, and the level goes, no, it's water.
But it's very fancy Belgian water.
Yes, Belgian tap water, Mark, actually. That's
it's probably, I mean, I feel safer drinking tap water in Europe, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, very good. I got the black coffee going.
Nice.
But it's much earlier in the day here in Chicago.
Yeah,
just turned noon.
It's noon there, and it's 7 p.m. here. Yeah.
That's right. So I want to welcome you officially. I want to say hi to all the people already tuning in. It's great. It feels like every time we do this, people find us quicker. So thank you. Kalina Miller, thanks for joining us again. It's great seeing you every time.
This is tough.
So it's tough. No, you're fine. You go ahead. I don't even think that I believe I can stop you from talking, Josh.
No, it's the attention deficit in me is just watching these things, and then I'm going to forget what we're talking about, and it's going to be, it could be long.
That is okay. That is okay. You know, we've had 3 episodes so far. 2 have gone over the time, so we'll see if we can get it back. But it's all right if we don't. So first off, tell everybody, where are you right now? And if you don't mind, would you mind moving your camera around and giving everybody a little look at where you are?
Not at all. I am in my living room in Liège, Belgium. Behind me, I got a couple pieces of art from my grandfather. He was a wonderful artist. I'm going to turn the camera around like an old person, and I'm going to show you the table, the kitchen, the garden back there, some of my son Felix's artwork. Here we have this is tap dancer art. That's Dean Diggins, a wonderful tap dancer in Maine. That's his living room in my living room. There's a man I took care of named Norman Wallace, who's part of the Wallace Brothers and who danced in the Cracker Jacks. That's his version of the Club de Lisa. I think that's a club in Chicago, and they had a line of dancers, and that's his painting. And there's another piece of my grandfather's, Felix's bicycle, and then the tour is over. That's the tour.
That's a great tour. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So we start all of these the same. I always like asking people just to kind of give me an idea of your first experience with tap dance. The first time you remember seeing it, hearing it, doing it.
My mother's friend showed me a Fred Astaire film. So it was like a Fred and Ginger film late at night when I was, 12 or something like that. And I don't know if that was the kick, but I got into musical theater then in 8th grade. So by the time I was, how old are you in 8th grade? I have no idea, 14. I started doing musicals, and then public high schools in Chapel Hill, North Carolina there was a wonderful theater director, and by the time I got to high school, I was doing a lot of musicals, and in those musicals, of course, you had to dance. So at some point, I had done a little soft shoe, and learned a little step. And in high school, there was a dance program. So my senior year, I actually started taking a tap class.
Wow, the late bloomer.
Yeah, yeah. Then
And
it
who
was
was that?
possible. Yep. Sorry.
Wow, who was that first teacher of yours?
There was a woman named Bobby Bounds, and because the high school had this theater department, there was a poster up. And after a month, I saw this poster, tap master class with Gene Medler.
Wow.
And I didn't know anything about that, but I didn't even know what a master class was. And I went, and he gave a master class, and at some point he looked at me and said, "Good shuffle," and I was like, "Good shuffle." I was like, he liked my shuffle. And then there was this class, and I did as much as I could, and then I dropped out. And then he showed no maps on my taps.
Oh yeah.
So I had the extreme good fortune a month into tap dancing to really discover the fabulous blooming subculture of the tap dance renaissance. And that was in September of 1983.
Wow. What a perfect time to come into the community.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
That was
great.
kind of a magical time. Yeah, we still had a lot of those first or second wave tap dancers from the 30s, 40s, 50s. And then all that kind of new work being created at that time by Brenda and Heather. And
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. A rich period. Yep.
So going along with that, one of the things we always talk about on this show is the concept of lineage, right? That's a big thing in tap dance. So would you mind sharing who some of your primary teachers and mentors were, as well as, if you know, who some of their mentors were? Who are your grand teachers?
Well, that's an interesting concept. I mean, when I talk to students, I tell them I could sort of start talking and name 25 teachers like that without stopping. So I tried to find, like you say, there were mentors and vaudevillians and film stars. They were still alive and around. So I really went on a 10-year quest to find as many teachers as I could. But within that list, I would say that, once I met Brenda Buffalino, that's 1987, I believe is my first class with her. She's like a 30-year plus mentor. So I would have to say that artistically, maybe technically, philosophically, spiritually, it's Brenda. Like I'm a Brenda Junior, Brenda Light. And then in Boston, and Brenda comes from the lineage of Charles Honey Coles. So I was also fortunate enough to know Honey Coles and have some kind of a friendship with him. And he was a very supportive person. He stayed to watch me a couple times in some very strange shows in Boston with horrible bands and whatever. Honey Coles would, he came. He was just an amazing, generous. I mean, those dancers, they were generous spirits and souls. So
without a doubt. Without a doubt.
In Boston, I met right away in Boston, 1988, when I moved there after college. I met a man named Joe Buckenwing Sterling. And Joe Sterling is an unknown vaudevillian who danced the entire 1930s for 10 years, doing two specialty acts, the Buckenwing and the Soft Shoe. So, he's one of those dancers who did 5 shows a day for 10 years. And he had been wounded in World War II, and he hadn't danced for a long period of time in between, but he was kind of brilliant about teaching what those two fundamental traditions meant and how to do them and how to approach them and wings. And, it was a great mentorship for me because I was not a very good dancer, and he really helped finish my dancing in a certain way with just skill and an eye,
Hi, Thelma Goldberg. Keep going.
Yeah.
I was saying hi to Thelma Goldberg. She just joined us.
Thelma, Dr. Goldberg. And
that's right.
Yeah, cool. Joe Sterling learned his first step from a dishwasher, an African-American dishwasher in a sandwich shop in Buffalo, New York in the early 1920s. And that guy taught him a time step. And there was a customer at that shop named Joe Dunn. And Joe Dunn, I believe his nickname was the King of the Wings. And he was a soft shoe dancer. And so that wing tradition that I got from Joe Sterling actually dates back until the 19-teens and a guy named Joe Dunn. And I know from Joe Sterling's son, he was called the King of the Wings. And that's it's a lineage that I was really fat and bad. And I wandered into this lineage that required you to jump and jump and jump. And it was not my nature. And I was very lucky. I was very lucky to find him.
Oh, that's a great story.
And that was that was a 3-year, go ahead.
No, go ahead. That was a 3-year.
That was a 3-year mentorship until Joe Sterling died in 1991. And so then I went searching for another mentor, and I was working with a woman I adore named Drika Overton, who we were connected for 30 years of performing. And Drika knew this man named Dean Diggins. And Dean Diggins danced in a classical ballet style of tap dance, he was a protege of Paul Draper. And
Oh,
that was
sure.
another tradition that I should have never really gotten into because I am the world's worst ballet dancer. But it was another 3-year apprenticeship. And I would go every week or every 2 weeks and drive up to Maine and go to Dean and meet with him in the studio, sometimes Drika's studio, and he would teach me this ballet tap technique that is almost a lost tradition now, in the sense that Draper set ballet moves. He put sounds to ballet movements. So it was a literal making sound with ballet moves. And I hold one piece of Draper repertory in my, well, I used to be able to do one piece of Draper repertory. And then the last time that I did Draper's T for Two, Brenda said, "You're gonna hurt yourself if you keep doing that piece." But that was that was 3 years studying this ballet-based style. So I considered those two the most, they were private lessons, and they were very personal, and they were very enriching, and they were very different from my nature, and they really stretched me and informed me in ways that I was not inclined.
That's fantastic. So is there anything that a mentor has ever said to you that has really stuck with you, that when you're dancing, you still hear that in the back of your head?
I met, I know that we're going to this later, but I met the dancer from Kansas City named Carnell Lyons, who had settled in Berlin. He was an African-American dancer from Kansas City. And I had 2 lessons with Carnell, and I'm so glad you asked this, because I just love the 2 lessons. Because, we're supposed to be kind and positive and affirmative, and here are my 2 lessons with Carnell. So the first lesson, we danced a little bit, and he said, "Man, you're dancing your ass off, but you're too fat. People are paying to see you dance. You got to cut a figure for the people." Gentle,
Absolutely
loving.
amazing.
That was an old timer, and he, one of these toothpick old guys, and I was
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Oh my God, are you kidding me?" Oh, it's a horror. So, and then I had this special opportunity to see him in New York City, like the month before he died. And I had that summer a job where I was on my mountain bike for the whole summer, and I was, for the first time in my life, in shape. And I went to New York City so proud that I had lost the weight so I could show Carnell that I was no longer fat. And he said, "Man, you look good. You lost all that weight, but you got no style." And I would say honestly, those 2 lessons are with me every day. Like, don't get too big and try to look respectable. And those are, I work on that every day. I'm like 30 years into the same 2 lessons, and they were sort of brutal in their way, but they were honest, and he
Yeah.
cared. They were like I knew that he was supportive. So I did, I had a lot of brutal lessons from different dancers, but those 2 lessons with Carnell Lyons stand out as far as during my formative time developmentally.
Well, the brutal lessons hurt, but they stick, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a few of those from my mentors. What made you fall in love with tap dance in the first place? When you saw that Fred Astaire film, what was it that connected to you and made you think, "Gosh, I got to go do this"?
I don't think that led me to it. I think when I took that first tap class, and I had played oboe, and I had been in chorus, and I had done some dance, and I had been in musicals, but I was sort of searching for a voice, but I didn't know it. And then the fact that you could move and make music, I mean, it was pretty much the first shuffle. And then I was like, "This is unbelievable," And I mean, after a month, I realized I had a serious problem on my left leg. Like, nobody told me that. But I was like, wow, my left leg does not work as good as my right leg, and who cared? Like, what was that ever going to get me in my life? I don't know. But I stayed after school because there was a studio, and I shuffled for like an hour, because there was a situation on the left side that needed correction. And that was just deep, instinctive, I didn't know there was no career path. There was no way to make a living. There was no thought of a living. I was a son of academics in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I was supposed to be somebody. I was not going to tap dance I don't know, but I was obsessed right away, and I think it filled a need to find a musical voice where I could also move. That's the most obvious thing in the world, but that really did it.
Mm. Um, You're known as a very, I would say, I first knew of you as a teacher. You've taught all over the world. You've taught at all the major tap festivals. What does the word technique mean to you within the context of tap dance? Because I always find that every tap teacher kind of has a different application or definition of what technique means within the context of what we do.
I mean, technique is like your paint. That's the metaphor I use. And, then you got to put it on the canvas. So you just want to have the best paint you can have. You just want to have something quality. And I really don't think, I mean, everybody makes their own technique based on how their teachers or their dancers, their artistic influences. So we all cobble together our own techniques based on our resources. So everybody's technique is the same and everybody's technique is different. And in the spirit of the old days, everybody's technique is going to be individual. I never wanted to have a technique that made me, I was never capable of dancing like other people visually. I was never interested, and my body was limited, so I could never make the same shapes as anybody else. So in a sense, technique is what serves you to express yourself at a given moment in a given style. And I really, now that, as you say, I've taught for about 125 years, I
Sounds
find
right.
I really rely, techniques are ever changing, and I have a lot of different little ways to approach this or that or the other. And I think technique has a lot to do with style, and it has a lot to do with how you want to express yourself. So I don't think
Mm,
there is a technique. I don't think I have a technique, but I draw on many techniques. And the more I mentor people, the more I realize, wow, I'm telling her to do that, but I'm telling him to do that. And, I think a word that came up as I was reviewing your questions in everything was variety. I just think the
mm,
more approaches you have to everything you do, the richer it is. The more people
mm.
decide on one specific way to do something, that's the right way, the more we all become limited.
Without a doubt. Well said. Thank you for that.
Hey,
Um,
thanks for asking.
of course. I don't know if this ever happens to you. Do you ever have those days where you wake up and you feel like you should dance because you have a show coming up or you're just trying to keep your chops and you just aren't feeling it? You're not feeling like you want to dance. You're tired. Maybe you're sore. What do you do to get over those humps? What do you do when you feel like you need to dance, but you just really don't want to or feel like it, or you're not feeling it that day?
You mean like if there's, for instance, a global pandemic going on and maybe your mood is affected, things like that.
Yes.
I, sometimes I don't dance, if I really don't want to. Like I have a studio now and I have a lot to do there. So yesterday I was supposed to go dance, but I ended up cleaning up mouse poop or whatever was in the basement, and I just spent 3 hours cleaning. But to exercise myself, to do something, I go for a walk because I'm 53 and a walk is all you need. So I go walk 3 miles, 4 miles, and then the next day I'm back in the studio. I mean, I used to find the spirit came and went for longer periods of time, but now I know that the next day I'm going to want to dance and I just go back. It's
That's awesome.
good.
I think for the people who haven't seen every episode of the Tea on Tap, kind of a through line I want them to take away from this is pretty much every guest I've interviewed when I've said, what do you do when you don't feel like dancing or you're just not having that right day? Almost all of them have said they don't dance and that that's okay. I think that's an important message for them to take home, that sometimes it just isn't there.
I think that's also the people you're interviewing are also mature artists. We're in our 40s and 50s, and you put in your 30 years of work, and then if you take a week, a month, 2 months off, it's because tap dance is like a bike. You're always going to be able to
Yeah.
get back on the bike and do it again, and you're a little rusty, but it comes back. I used to, when I was young and developing, I would take the month of August off and not dance at all, and I was sort of
Mm.
a freak because I felt after a month of not dancing, I wanted to dance so badly, and my body felt good. I used to, August was down. I had
Ah,
no work anyway, so I would really take a
yep.
break. You know.
Ah, love it. Kind of related to this, have you ever had to come back from a major injury or setback of any kind?
Yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, the last 3 or 4 years, I've had problems with plantar fasciitis. And so I came home one night and I said, yeah, I said to Stephanie, she said, how's it going? I said, well, pretty good, but I don't really want to stand up on my right leg or my left leg, And she was like, what? And I said, well, but if I'm not standing, I'm fine. Then I crawled upstairs. I mean, I, I never got it to the fully most painful period, but it was this really disabling discomfort. And that took me sort of 3 years to fully recover from. Like now I'm confident again. But,
Yeah.
a couple of 3 months ago, my balls on my feet were hurting because I realized the chronic abuse of that tap shelf, where the toe tap sits. My feet
Yep.
were killing me. So I now got these Leo Ultratones. I have like the world's largest tap, so I could change where the shelf sits. I mean, I had to go
Well,
into the
smart.
nerdiest little. Actually, Sebastian Weber was in residence with us, and he said, it's got to be something specific because I was in a global panic in February. And he said, it's got to be something specific. So I went and measured my shoes, and I saw that my addiction to the Capezio Teletone was actually keeping me injured. So,
Wow.
little foot problem with that, but that seems to have fixed it. So now I'm wearing taps that are as big as my face, more or less. And
Love it. Love it. And again, the lesson is that yes, you were injured, but you came back, and here you are dancing and killing it. So I hope everybody watching takes that with them, because
well, no, I'm
that's
just sitting
something.
on the couch talking about this. So I appreciate the vote.
Well, I think it's important because I know that there comes a time in some injuries where you really have that feeling, oh my gosh, what if I can't dance again? Right? What if I can't do the thing that gives me joy, pays my bills? So I
Devastating.
think it's so important to hear stories like yours where you have, you go through those feelings and those experiences and you come out the other side and you're
Yeah.
still able to do all the things you could do.
No, that was devastating, really, to think because
Yeah.
it's I couldn't stand for long periods of time without discomfort, and we were trying to sell our
Mm,
school, and we would have these 8-hour days, and standing on my feet. I mean, at some point, I was weepy at certain moments where I was like, I can't even
sure.
stand, man. This is rough. So
Yeah.
physical therapy and patience and rest and teaching in a much reduced fashion and not too much repetitive things and
Yeah.
vigilance, I guess.
Yeah. Plantar fasciitis is no joke. If
No,
if anybody that's had it knows
yeah.
that pain is for real, and it is debilitating for a tap dancer.
And actually,
Um,
Ayudeli Cassell said, I had it too, and you will recover. Like, I had a couple people who were just very sweet at
oh,
that moment who said some things, and I was like, okay, you had it bad, I will recover. Had some people who was, sweet.
it's important to hear that, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. How has your tap dance style been influenced? Obviously, I know it's been influenced by the people that you've worked with, but do you feel in any way that it's been influenced by your regionality? Do you think that coming out of North Carolina, obviously, anybody out there watching this should know if they don't about the amazing tap tradition in North Carolina, and a number of people who have come out of North Carolina who are among for my money, the very most interesting and accomplished tap dancers to watch. Do you think that there's anything regionally that you took from your time tap dancing in that area? Um, any way that it influenced your style or your approach to the art?
Well, I mean, what I took from North Carolina and Gene specifically was a tremendous nurturing influence, and I had a really deep relationship with him for, I would say, the first 10 years that I was dancing because I was always go back to Chapel Hill. And then when he started having festivals, and he was just the most loving person on earth. So, and he pointed me, he said to me, well, when you go up north, you got to meet Buffalino. So he gave me the name and I went searching for Brenda, is there Chapel Hill style? I mean, I always call Chapel Hill the birthplace of rhythm dance, just to bug the world, because I I think stylistically, I think more in terms of East Coast and West Coast schools, like because I was, I knew Buster Brown, I was friends with Buster, I had a friendship with LaVon Robinson, I knew Brenda, Honey Coles, Heather, the New York dancers, I was connected to the East Coast school. And then with my first tap festival, I met Eddie Brown. I met Lynn Dally. So I found out about the West Coast school. At that point, Chicago was emerging. It was not the center place for tap dance that it became and is now. So I think, I wouldn't say Chapel Hill was a place where people came out of, and then they, but I think more East Coast and West Coast in terms of that, in terms of style. And for me, at developing.
So I know that vaudeville and the traditions of vaudeville are one of the things that have really influenced and suffused your work. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Um, I think the vaudeville artists were the greatest.
Mm.
And I think we're all poor imitators, really. I think variety shows and what that means was there was such a richness of skill and the layering of skills, so that you had to be the best tap dancer on earth just to get the job. Like, everybody was a fantastic dancer, and then there were these other skills that got layered, and then there were these performance qualities, and there was humor, and there was intelligence, and there was acrobatics, and there were, there were canes and hats and tricks and jokes, and I think that now I find like pure tap dancing is sort of boring in a certain way, because it's not layered. Like, I find that the tap technique of today is probably greater than at any time. I mean, probably it is greater than at any time in history, but I find the expressive qualities of tap dance have sort of diminished in service of the technique. And at that point, the technique was simpler and clearer, and a little more minimal in terms of the amount of sounds produced per square inch. It was a more open landscape. And, where I live is swing, and vaudeville was swinging, so that whole swinging aesthetic with the variety and the humor and the layers of skill, I'm a restless artist. I never wanted to do anything one way for too long. So I try to have, a multiplicity of approaches. And I think the vaudeville artists, they were the embodiment of that.
Yeah. So you and I have quite a few friends in common, as I think most of the tap community does. But there's two gentlemen that you're dear friends with who are also dear friends of mine. And that is Kurt Albert and Klaus Blythe.
Yes.
I would love it if you would please tell everybody, about your association with them, but then please tell us all about the Paddle and Roll Championship, because I think this is phenomenal.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I had a gig in 1990. I went overseas. I went and danced with a band in France, and I made enough money as a young person to go touring. And so I went to meet a dancer I met in Boston named Manu, and I went to Nuremberg to meet Manu. And she said, "Hey, dude, I just had a baby, so you're going to stay with my friend Klaus." And, who was Klaus? So she took me to this guy Klaus's house, and I stayed overnight. And then we sat there at breakfast the next morning. Yeah, it's a moment with this. And we sat there staring at each other, these unknown dudes, like, and he was putting honey all over his buttered bread, and I was staring at this dude with the honey, and I was putting mustard all over my bread, and he was staring at me, and it was just hilarious. We were just these two guys fascinated by each other. And, later we found out that we both started dancing in September of 1983. We're like these funny German-American brothers separated at birth, and we were bonded over breakfast, and it was deep, and his roommate was this guy named Kurt, who was out of town. So I didn't know Kurt. And, right away, Klaus said, "Hey, it happens to be this guy Carnell Lyons' birthday. You want to go with me to the birthday in Berlin?" So, Klaus drove me to Berlin and installed me in this apartment of this old time guy who was, watching. "You want to know what's happening at Radio City Music Hall? You got to come to Berlin, Germany." Carnell was just the spirit of everything. And, and then he told me I was too fat. So, it was beautiful. But, I just loved Klaus. And then I met Kurt, and Kurt was more complicated. I wasn't so sure about Kurt at the beginning. I was like, this guy Kurt, I don't know. And Kurt right now, I have to say, is the person who calls me most during this whole pandemic and checks on my mental health. Like, he's become like my other brother. So we had our first performance together in 1993. I think in Freiburg. I think Sebastian produced that show. Maybe Uwe Meusel was involved. So we started performing together, and we started doing little things. And at some point, I had a gig with Kurt and Klaus in a town called Paderborn, Germany. And I made up this. I said, okay, because I was still not sure about Kurt. I was like, all right, Klaus, we're going to play a little trick on Kurt. I said, I'm going to go out to the audience and tell them Paderborn, where the paddle was born. So, I had some really bad shtick going, like, for the audience, and I was like, okay, you don't know, but I kept saying Paderborn is this historic town and blah, blah, blah. And then finally the second half, I'm like, Paderborn, where the paddle was born, and then people were like, wow, so I said, okay, now we're going to have a competition. And then, Kurt walks out, he's like, what? And then Klaus was like, and then Klaus, that's his brother. He's like, well, we're not going to do it. And I'm like, shut up, everybody. I started yelling on stage. And then, so we had 3 rounds, and you had to paddle. So I did it as a surprise to mess with Kurt's head. So we did 3 rounds of paddle, and the audience went crazy for Kurt Albert. He won the freaking competition. I was horrified. I remain horrified. It's 30 years ago. I go to therapy about this every Tuesday at 10 o'clock. I go talk about the paddle roll, how I lost it. And it was so funny. I mean, and then Kurt is slumped in a chair. This is where I fell in love with Kurt. Now I remember now, because Kurt is slumped in a chair backstage after this thing. And he says, my whole life, I never won anything. My entire life, I never won anything. And he was honestly so moved that he had won this competition. And I was like, it's not fair. It's not right. It's bull. Man, this is wrong. And Klaus is just laughing. Because Klaus is like between us and knows that I'm an idiot trying to like make fun of his friend. And then his friend won the paddle. And, it was on. It was on, and then we staged it one year. Like, then I made Kurt the champion the next year. We did some bad show business thing. And then another year later, it really became a thing. And then I got a costume because I was kind of, had 2 times I'd lost the paddle and roll. So I was kind of ready to win it a little bit. So I got a little costume piece together. And then Klaus finds out I have a costume and he tells everybody. So everybody shows up with these ridiculous costumes. Like, everybody showed up in space alien outfits and Native American headdresses and exploding fireworks, and there were boxers dancing to Rocky, and Christina Delius did a cooking demonstration. I mean, it was out of control. And we bought like a €5 trophy, and I was desperate to win that trophy. And I began taking off my clothes because I wanted to win. I needed to win. So I had put on a whole American flag thing. I played Yankee Doodle Dandy in flag boxer shorts with red, white, and blue everywhere, and a headdress. And in the end, 2 assistants came out and lit the sparklers on my head on fire. I ended up flaming and playing Yankee Doodle Dandy and tap dancing, and I still lost the freaking thing because Pia Nisis, that German devil, came on in roller skates with paddles and sang and paddled and rolled. I'm still angry about that too. Pia, if you're out there, I'm still angry at you. Okay, I'm an angry, bitter person. But I mean, it was on. It was full on. And here's what I have to say about that. I don't really like the idea of competition in dance. And at that time, the competition scene was really developing. And I had judged a couple competitions, and I felt vaguely dirty afterwards. Like, I don't believe in competition in dance. I don't like competition in dance. I don't think that it's the most artistic expression. There are fabulous dancers in the competition world. But at that point, it was sort of my beginning to make a satirical statement about, like, really, come on, everybody. Tap dance is an art, and an art should not be put out there for everybody to judge. And, the commodification of tap dance, it was also, I mean, it was a stupid satirical thing, but it was a little bit political. And then, I didn't like it. And I still was losing. But it was in Germany, and the Germans, they love the nudity. So I thought, and I determined to take off as much clothes as I could. And so I got this chainmail, and I had this thing, and I went to a brilliant costumer in Boston, and I had my chainmail, and I had this crotch piece. I don't know. And he listened to me talk, and he said, well, your piece is about the head, the heart, and the crotch. So I went out with my chainmail, and I made this dance belt with these taps on it, and I banged all over myself, and I made this stupidest thing in the world. And I lost again. Because we were all doing such stupid things. Sebastian Weber came out and did a classy body music thing. All you had to do was one single paddle to win the thing. There had to be a paddle to qualify. Sebastian came out and, as himself, just danced normally while we all did idiotic things, and Sebastian took that trophy. So I'm like the most time loser of the paddle and roll competition, which was my idea. I'm bitter. I'm a bitter man when I talk about this. And then, well, that leads to another place if you want to talk about the Warrior, but that's the piece that became the Warrior. But it started as a joke in the paddle and roll competition. And that was all, I mean, Klaus and I we made a musical, and we invited some people, and we set the birth of the paddle and roll in the German countryside, like on a farm in
Mm.
1886. We recreated the paddle being born in Paderborn, and we had Dutch farm workers in there, and we had chicken sounds. I mean, we made a musical to say, okay, tap dance was the paddle,
Mm.
and Sebastian, who's this brilliant person, Sebastian Weber, he played the fool, and he actually walked around with a piece of paper, like talking to himself and doing all these weird things. And at some point, he did a single paddle, and we all went, So we actually set the birth of we did the birth of the paddle. I mean, and it'll never be seen again. And all the videos bad, but they were just creative, fun. I had big
Love it.
workshops then, and so I would take the workshop money and just distribute it to the people, and we would pay. But Klaus,
Mm.
he went around finding farm tools. I mean, we went to a local farm. We got rakes and shovels and benches and picnic tables. I mean, we were full on. We had a costumer in Nuremberg helped us. We were dressed in lederhosen. I mean, it was bad tap theater at its finest, and those paddle and roll competitions for all of us who were in there, it was influential, really, because it made us stop being such serious tap dancers and try
Yes.
some other things.
Well, I have to say, I love that for a number of reasons. One, there is that strain in the history of tap dance, right? It's what you said earlier. There is a strain of tap dance that was all about making people smile and laugh, right? The whole Legomania and an eccentric movement. And the fact that in some way that you're carrying that on, I think is fabulous. I also love testing the elasticity of this art form and seeing what can it do and how far can we take it in different directions. I think especially given that you do know your history, you were there, you've met many of the people that are important to our history. So it's not like the person who just kind of blindly goes out there and does something out of ignorance. You go out there with a sense of the history of this form, and then subverting expectation and trying new things and making satire. And that, I have to tell you, this is one of the reasons I've always looked up to you and respected you as an artist, Josh.
Thanks,
Not
Mark.
to get too
We're
mushy.
gonna weep.
But
We're gonna cry.
I
There's a
know. Well, and
pandemic going on. I'm gonna.
I'll tell you this before I keep going with the questions. I heard your name long before I met you, because I think it was in 1992, and might have been in St. Louis at the St. Louis Tap Festival. Diane Walker's always been somebody who's been very generous with me, as I think she is with many people, giving me time and stories and inspiration. And she told me at one point, she's like, "You got to meet this Josh Hilberman." She's like, "I think you two would really hit it off." And then I didn't meet you for like 15 years. So, and then I met you, and you were everything I wanted you to be. So,
Thanks,
I'm going to keep going with the questions. It's going to get too sweet. I don't want that. Boo.
I know we're gonna like the Sap Fest. The people are tuning out. They're all hanging up. It's
Yeah, nobody wants to see people liking each other. This is kind of fun. So, I'm lucky enough that I get to work in Europe every year. One of the things that I discovered when I was there is that you have made a very significant contribution to the tap canon. I remember I was in a show over there, and the very first show I was in Europe, they said, we're trying to find some pieces we all know and that we can all do together. And, I think there were people from a few different countries there. And so, Shim Sham, of course, the S Chorus, and Laura, and Chair Dance, and all that kind of stuff. And then they said, Cappella Josh. And all the Europeans raised their hand. And I was like, Cappella Josh? And they looked at me like I was an idiot. They were like, "You don't know Cappella Josh?" Would you please tell everybody? So, Cappella Josh is a dance that you choreographed, and it is literally a standard in Europe. I don't think there's a tap dancer there, and I think in parts of America too. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that dance and where it originated from, why you originally choreographed it?
Well, thank you, Mark. I like, you talk about Diane connecting people. I think I've really liked connecting people in my artistic life too. When you find people, and there were two dancers that I loved very dearly in Holland, Marijke de Braal and Marijn van Veen. And I was like, Marijn was like my sister. And so when I would make my tours, I would always stay some in Amsterdam. And I was, I said, hey, so I got them dancing together because they were both moaning about there was nobody to dance with. And for a while, they were a very successful duo partnership. And then they said, hey, would you make us a dance? And I had set something a cappella The first step actually came from a solo project where I was trying to do voice and tap at the same time. So I had this time step and I was trying to rap over it. And that was totally unsuccessful, but it was a very good step. And so I had made this dance for a small dance studio, two boys in Norwood, Massachusetts, Carrie Smith, a wonderful dancer in Norwood. And so that was sort of the gist of it. And there were things that I was using. And then I went to Amsterdam with these, and my friends, I think I got paid the sum of $200 for this dance, which I worked on with them for 2 weeks or something like that. It was
Oh
just an
my God.
excuse to hang around with my friends. And that dance was a little bit like a run-on sentence in that every day we would go and make studio, and it got longer and longer and longer. In the way that all dances need editing, I don't think I ever edited it. So there's a long piece, and Marika, who's brilliant, probably could recreate it from her notes. Like there's a lot of that dance that never appeared. So, and I was on tour, so I went. It was 2001. It was when September 11 happened. So I went to Berlin, and then I went on to Spain, and there I was in Spain teaching material. And so the material I was working on at the time was this piece. It didn't have a name. It was just this piece that I had done 2 weeks before with my two Dutch friends. So, I started teaching in Barcelona in 1993, and for about an 8-year period, I was there for 10 workshops. So I was sort of the first big outside influence in Barcelona. Barcelona had teachers, and Barcelona had a tradition of dance going back to the 70s. There were teachers that moved there. There was teachers that taught the teacher of Guillem. There was Guillem. There was a history in Barcelona that starts in the late 60s, early 70s. And so I was sort of the first outside, and I fell in love with the people. I mean, my first workshop in Barcelona was a love story. It was 1993. I was young. They were beautiful. They were beautiful dancers. They were hungry for material. I mean, I sweat more in Barcelona in those 10 workshops than I did in the rest of my entire life. And they were 2-week workshops. The first time was maybe 3 days, and it was love, and I saw all the dancers develop. I had Ruben Sanchez in my class as a young guy. I had Jeff Melendez in my class. Laia Molins was there. Guillem was not really my student because he was well developed and developing, but if he was in Barcelona, he was always taking class. There were all these young, beautiful dancers there, and I was just the guy who came to give some information. So, and I would try, because there were 2 weeks, to always deliver some repertory, because I was trying to be a content provider. The people were beautiful dancers, and I was making dances at that point, and I just was enthusiastic, and they were too, and it was like it was beautiful spirit. And so, and I didn't know it at the time, but it was sort of my last workshop of that era. And I put this little dance on these people in Barcelona, and September 11th had happened, and I went away, and I did not go back there for 4 or 5 years, but I went to a festival in Finland, maybe 2004, and these two Spaniards approached me, and they said, we're going to perform your dance. Would you like to do it with us? And I said, what dance is that? And they were like, the Cappella, and I was like, what? They were like, Cappella Josh. And I was like, I really honestly was like that. I was like, what? I said, can you show me some? Like that. I was like the dumbest dude in the world. And they started doing this thing, and I'm like, oh yeah. Oh, that's mine. Okay. Nice. I said, no, I can't do that with you. I don't know that dance. I honestly, I put that dance on them, and I walked away, and I never thought about it again. And then they were like, but everybody knows it. And I'm like, what do you mean everybody knows it? They're like, no, everybody knows it. And then I have a little visual aid, which is so funny. I brought a little thing to show the people at home. This is my Preemie Claqueta.
Ooh.
And I know you have a long and loving relationship with Barcelona too. You can appreciate it. I'm
I
like the
do.
only guiri, is the outsider in Catalan, guiri. I'm the only guiri ever to get the Preemie Claqueta here. And it's like my proudest accomplishment in my life. Thelma has a doctorate. I have the Preemie Claqueta. And in 2006, they gave me this prize for my contributions to the community. And everybody knew the dance. Like old, young, one leg, no leg, 3 legs. Like I couldn't. It was like a weep fest. I couldn't believe it, and I don't know. I think it filled the need. It's not the most complicated dance in the world. It has a pullback. It's rhythmically pretty interesting. They turned it into their shim sham, so it served a purpose. I don't know if I didn't teach the ending of it or if they didn't ever remember it, but they preserved this version of it that there's like the Barcelona version sort of became the standard version. And I had to go to Guillaume and say like, hey, can you show me that one step? Because I don't remember that thing at all. So I have a teaching video and there's the lost step because Guillaume is like, well, it goes like this, you know. So, I mean, I had to relearn my own piece. And I, honestly, I don't know what it is about that piece, but people love it, and it had a. But the people did it. You know, I just gave that dance and walked away, and they loved it. You know, I think I don't know. I don't know.
You know, there is something special, I feel like, about certain communities of tap, and I agree that Barcelona is one of the very best. There's just an energy and a generosity and a kindness and a hunger. Um, I will tell you that I have heard all those things said about the space that you have now created. Could you tell us a little bit about the move to Europe and about opening your own space and becoming one of the real hubs of tap dance in Europe?
Thanks. Yeah, I had a very happy marriage and then a very unhappy marriage in Boston, and then I met a woman who was Belgian, and I never knew anything about Belgium, but that romance turned serious pretty quickly, and then we decided to have a baby, and then all of a sudden I had a girlfriend who had a baby, and there was a thing happening, and I needed to move to Europe. It was clear to me that my work life was not that great in the States, and her work life was significant. So, okay, and to raise a kid, I don't know, at that point I thought raising a kid, support services, daycare, child, school, it must be Europe. It can't be Boston, because if it's Boston, I can't afford it. You know, I had friends who were paying, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to send a child to nursery school, you know, and I was like, well, it's just not going to happen, you know. So in about 2 minutes, I decided I would move to Europe. And I didn't have anything to do. I mean, I wish I could show it. There's a garden house. There's a rotting structure in the backyard. So I put a tap mat back there and I started practicing. And at some point I thought, you know, my life is going to end in a rotting garden house in a backyard in Belgium. And it was like the most depressing thought of my life. And then, you know, Stephanie came home and I'm like, we have to get a space, you know. And I had spent all these years traveling and teaching for wonderful people like Thelma, and I had support of studios and colleagues and workshops and festivals, and I didn't want to settle down, and I didn't want a space, and I didn't want a space, and then one day I had to have a space. So we found a building and we bought it. Well, we'll have bought it in 15 years and 4 months. We have another in 15 years and 4 months we will own the building. And but
Nice.
we did it, and we did nothing to the building but clean it out of junk and put in it's about a 1,200-foot floor. And I have
Wow.
friends from Boston who are floor makers, and I licensed there. They're called Wooden Kiwi. You know, they're the Boston version of, is Omara in Chicago, isn't it? Omara, the Midwest floor guy. So
I
there's a
believe so.
Boston floor company I love called Wooden Kiwi. Thelma has their floors. They were in all the New England dance studios, Bates Dance Festival. All the big studios had Wooden Kiwi floors. It's a fantastic floor. Green Streets. Anyway, I licensed their floor, and we built it here. And you know, if you build it, they will come, and the people have come. And you know, I, with the injuries, I've really had a little identity crisis about myself as a performer, I would say, and I'm much less interested in my own self performing these days, and much more interested in teaching. But the space, we finally in 5 years turned it into a really nice theater situation. So it converts pretty quickly into a lit, beautiful space for dance presentation. And we have a theater that the studio seats 120, you know, with social distancing 20, but with the full crowd 120. Uh, and so we started producing, and this year we actually presented, before everything stopped, we had 5 shows on the schedule. So that includes companies from New York, that includes, we had Sebastian's company in residence, and they did this spectacular, one of the most spectacular shows I've ever seen was just there in February, called Folk Fiction. You know, so we're really presenting. Leela Petroni and Jet Melendez were in residence for a week. We also, I know how underserved tap dance is in the
Yeah.
culture, in everybody's culture, and everybody thinks it's better somewhere else, and it's not good anywhere. You know, Michelle Dorrance had a commission at Jacob's Pillow, and she came to Liège to put that thing together. Now, what is a commission from Jacob's Pillow doing in a little studio in Liège? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense, but it tells you, you know, she walked in and she said, you know, New York has nothing like this. You know, that's Michelle Dorrance, MacArthur winning Michelle Dorrance is saying
Yeah.
New York has nothing like this. And so it's like become my mission in my midlife with the gray, to really curate and help
Mm.
produce new creations, because in our community it's we're underserved, we're not served, we're unserved, you know. So I found a niche not only for myself as a
Mm.
teacher, but really to encourage creation, you know. And it's a very informal program, and anybody out there on the Instagram got a show, talk to me about it and come on, because we have so many hours on the board during the day that are not used. Like, you know, I really want people to come create stuff and then present it. You know, that's become sort of my late life mission, because you know how it is. You go teach a master class somewhere and the sound system doesn't work and the floor isn't right. And, you
Yep.
know, the conditions for tap dance are universally atrocious. You know, so
Yep.
when I opened this space, everybody said, well, you have to share it with other dance forms. And I said, well, you know what? Other dance forms don't share with us.
Ah!
You know, so
Yes.
why actually would I need to share with anybody else? Because tap dance is going to be enough. And people are like, tap dance will not be enough. You know, and to
Mm.
really make a good living, tap dance is not quite enough. But the way it's
Sure.
going and artistically and what's happening, and because Stephanie has a good job, we're able to subsidize this space and makes allow people to create, you know, and
Yeah.
encourage the creation of new tap dance work, you know. And so I'm I love it. I love it. And I'm thrilled because these
Amazing.
fantastic dancers come in and I get to see and sometimes discuss
Mm.
or just clean the toilets or bring the food. You know, I am just a producer guy. I am a servant to the art form and I love it. You know,
Mm.
it fills me.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, Josh, it is time for a 2-minute tap lesson. You have 2 minutes to teach a tap step, idea, or concept. I'm timing you. Oh, there's my
Okay,
watch.
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Two
Here's
minutes.
my idea. All these people are stuck at home, and everybody is teaching lessons and learning lessons in these limited little spaces. And I think it's time for everybody to start making up their own steps. So I'm going to give you 5 little tools. We're going to talk about quarter notes like boom, 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 because I never got beyond 4 in school. And we're going to talk about swinging eighth notes like shuffles or flaps, ta 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 ta. Then we're going to talk about offbeats, ta 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 ooh, or da 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 e. So we have offbeats, quarter notes, swinging eighth notes. Talk about triplets, diddly diddly diddly. Good, everybody. And 16th notes, chaka chaka buka chuka 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 boom. And we're going to just use it's a little do-it-yourself composer. So we're going to take a little 1 bar of quarter notes, 1 bar of swinging triplets, 1 bar of triplets, and 1 bar of 16th notes, and we're going to try to slip in an offbeat every once in a while. So we're going to come up with 4 bars. We're going to go like
Mm.
boom, boom, boo, e, cha 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 cha, sickety boo 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 boo, braka doopa. There you go. So we're going
Ooh.
up the compositional chain. We're going from empty to filled. Now we're going to switch that and we're going to go down the compositional chain. We're going to start full and we're going to go to empty. So we're going to go digga 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 dig boom boom diddly diddly do each cha ooh chi ooh e bam 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 bam. Voila.
Mm.
Voila. So yeah. So then we're
That
going to put
is.
that we got 8. Am I 2 minutes up?
Keep going. I want to hear this. I am
Listen.
not going to cut you off.
8 bars. Ta ta to e ta 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 siddly do to do be stiddly diddly do boo boo to diddly diddly do gas to diddly diddly do keys to oo to boom boom ooh e. That's it.
Ah.
So out there at home, thank you. Figure it out, man. Make a step. Make a step.
Mm.
It's time for the world at home to make their own steps. Do it yourself.
Yes.
Tap dance compositional tool brought to you by Hilberman.
Yes, love it. You better believe we're going to cut that part of this interview out and post that separately on Facebook because that was brilliant. All
Thanks.
right. It is time for rapid risk. This is one of my favorite parts. I have 10 questions. Most of these you should be able to answer in 2 words or less. Are you
Okay.
ready?
Yes.
What kind of tap shoes do you like to wear?
Spanish. I have 3
There's a
brands of
lot of
Spanish
Spanish
tap shoes.
tap.
I
Casimiro's,
have
Ruben
Casimiro.
Sanchez.
I have what?
Casimiro, Ruben
Casimiro,
Sanchez.
Ruben Sanchez, and Artefil.
Oh, yes. Yeah, there's a lot of great tap shoes in Spain. Taps, do you like them tight or just a little bit loose?
Tight.
Favorite song to tap dance to? You have one song to dance to. What is it?
I don't have one. I have an artist, Billy Taylor, pianist. Billy Taylor.
Next question. Favorite composer?
I don't have one. I don't have one, but I'll add Kenny Burrell, guitar. Kenny Burrell, Billy Taylor. Thank you.
Nice. Do you count, so you're in 4/4 time. Do you count in fours or eights?
I never got past 4 in school.
Nice. Favorite tap dancer to watch who is no longer with us?
That's a tough one. Bill Robinson.
Favorite living tap dancer to watch?
I have 4.
Go.
Joseph Wiggin, most swinging man on earth. Michelle Dorrance, I love her. She's like my niece. Sarah Reich. What's not to love about Sarah Reich? Melinda Sullivan.
Nice. Favorite choreographed tap piece you've ever seen or done?
You know, done, The Warrior. Seen, yeah, a lot.
Yeah. What single tap performance that you've seen do you remember the most vividly?
Early 1990s, Brenda Buffalino, 3 different versions of bird characters tap dancing. It was just the best.
Gorgeous. You can go back in time and see any one tap performer or performance going all the way back to the 1840s. What do you choose to see?
All the way to the 1840s.
Yeah,
because I was
or farther back.
I was going to go with Bojangles, but if you let me see Master Juba, I go for William Henry Lane.
Yes. Best venue you've ever played?
Canada. I don't remember the theater. Decidedly Jazz Dance Works produced me 2 times. And 2010, the most spectacular technical conditions I ever experienced in my life.
Finally, our final question. How do you perform the second step of the Shim Sham?
Correctly.
What count do you start on?
Correctly. I perform it correctly.
And what does that mean? What count do you start on?
The Shim Sham is all about the 2 and the 4. And anybody that believes there's a 1 involved is deluded and has problems. So get that thing back on the 2 and the 4 where it's originally supposed to be.
I love it. That is the end of Rapid Riffs. So if anybody has a question, you can toss it in. But while I wait, I want to thank everybody involved with this. I want to thank our marketing director, Leah Koch, our entire marketing team, Molly, Allie, Sarah's been helping with that. Jen's been helping with that. We have 2 new interns that are amazing. And all the dancers at Chicago Tap Theater, thank you for continuing dancing during this difficult time. I want to thank my sound engineer and set dresser, the Jennifer Yonley. Coming up, I got to tell you, the next few episodes of Tea on Tap, we just have had one like star after another. Coming up in the next week, we have Star Dixon and Michelle Dorrance.
Wow.
So,
it's so cool. Mark, I have to say, sorry to interrupt, but this is such a cool thing, and I really appreciate being a part of it. And I see these names of people. I just saw Bakari's name go by. I see Avalon is on there. I mean, you're really doing an international community thing here that is so special, and I had no idea. And obviously, as an Instagram former virgin about an hour ago, I'm really overwhelmed by that, and I appreciate it, and it's wonderful. So thank you very much, for having me.
Thank you. I'm sincerely touched by that. It's I will tell you, we are working our butts off over here every single day. Tomorrow is our book club, and it is our second and last day with Miss Barbara Duffy. We're discussing her book, Tap into Improv, with Barbara in the room. Fantastic. Yeah, so if you've ever got any question about improv, make sure you check in tomorrow for book club. That's on my list.
Barbara and I had a dance partnership for a couple of years, and I have to say that was brutal. Dancing next to Barbara Duffy was one of the most brutal experiences of my life because there was a precision and an exactitude that was just, it was fantastic. We created a couple of pieces together and shared the stage a little bit, and what a master.
She is amazing, amazing. So our final question is the same every episode, and I call this the final shuffle. When you shuffle off this mortal coil, how do you most want to be remembered as a tap artist?
I have no answer to that. Everybody gets to decide. I can't answer it. I would love to be remembered. That would be enough. If I were remembered for my being part of this great oral tradition, I would be content.
That is a really poignant answer. Josh Hilberman, thank you so very much. It has been such a sincere pleasure having you for the past hour. I want to thank you for your kind friendship over the years. I want to thank you for joining us today. To everybody that tuned in, thank you so much. This will live for 24 hours on Instagram, and then it is gone. Okay, so you better check it out.
Thank you. Yeah, thank
you. All right.
All right.
Thank you so much, Josh. Thank you, everybody out there.
Bye, everybody.